There are relationships where people still talk every day. Not out of obligation. Not out of habit alone. But because life requires coordination. The conversations sound normal. They sound polite. They sound functional. Nothing seems wrong. From the outside, everything appears steady. Two people sharing a home. Sharing routines. Sharing responsibilities. They know what the other prefers for breakfast. They know how the other takes their tea. They know which side of the bed feels more comfortable. This knowledge feels like closeness. And in many ways, it is. But emotional closeness is quieter. Harder to measure. Easier to miss. It doesn't announce itself when it begins to fade. At first, nothing feels different. Words still come easily. Messages are still exchanged. Plans are still made. Then, gradually, conversations shorten. Not in length, but in depth. Feelings are mentioned briefly. Then smoothed over. Then set aside. A thought begins with honesty. Then changes direction halfway through. Not because the truth isn't allowed, but because it feels inconvenient. There is no clear moment when this starts. No argument to mark the shift. No raised voices. Just a subtle adjustment. One person begins to notice that certain feelings require explanation. An explanation requires energy. So those feelings are simplified. They choose easier words. Softer emotions. Versions that feel safer to share. The other person listens attentively. They respond quickly. They want to help. They offer reassurance. They offer logic. They offer solutions. Everything they say sounds supportive. But something doesn't land. Being understood is not about having a response. It is about having space. Space for a feeling to exist without correction. Over time, the one who speaks less deeply doesn't feel rejected. They feel unseen. Unseen feels different than unloved. Unseen is quieter. It doesn't hurt sharply. It dulls slowly. They stop reaching for certain conversations. Not consciously. Just naturally. They don't want to complicate the moment. They don't want to add weight to an already full day. So they keep things light. The other person senses the change. But they interpret it as calm. Less tension. Less emotional heaviness. It feels like stability. And stability feels good. So nothing is questioned. Life continues. Work continues. Responsibilities stack neatly on top of each other. There are shared jokes. Shared memories. Shared evenings. Yet something internal begins to drift. Not away from love. But away from expression. Emotional closeness needs curiosity. Curiosity takes time. Time feels scarce. Conversations become efficient. Efficient listening solves problems. But it doesn't always invite truth. Truth takes longer. Truth doesn't arrive packaged. It unfolds slowly. There are moments when one person almost says something real. Then stops. They sense the timing isn't right. They sense the other is tired. They sense the conversation will move too fast. So they wait. Waiting becomes familiar. The other person remains present in practical ways. They show up. They contribute. They care. They don't realize something is missing. Because nothing has been taken away loudly. The relationship still functions. But emotional intimacy doesn't fade loudly. It fades quietly. It fades in the absence of lingering questions. In the absence of curiosity. When listening becomes about resolution instead of understanding. There are evenings when the house feels peaceful. Quiet. Orderly. And yet, the quiet feels slightly hollow. No one can name why. One person begins to feel like a guest in their own emotional life. They don't blame their partner. They don't blame themselves. They simply notice the shift. Love still exists. Care still exists. But closeness feels distant. Distance doesn't always mean separation. Sometimes it means parallel lives. Two people moving together. But not touching internally. There are no betrayals here. No obvious mistakes. Just small moments that pass too quickly. A feeling mentioned too briefly. A response given too soon. The moment closes. Another opportunity quietly disappears. Over time, one person becomes more private. Not secretive. Just contained. They keep thoughts to themselves. Not because they aren't important, but because sharing feels heavy. The other person notices calm. They don't notice distance. Distance doesn't announce itself. It settles in. It feels like familiarity. Familiarity can be comforting. But familiarity without curiosity becomes shallow. Emotional safety requires slowness. Slowness has become rare. There is still affection. Still kindness. But kindness without depth feels thin. There are moments when one person wonders when things changed. They can't find a date. They can't find a reason. So they stop wondering. Wondering feels pointless without language. The relationship continues. From the outside, nothing appears wrong. Inside, something feels unfinished. Not broken. Not damaged. Just incomplete. This story doesn't offer solutions. It doesn't suggest conversations. It doesn't push awareness into action. It simply stays with the noticing. Noticing that love can exist without closeness. Noticing that listening can happen without understanding. Noticing that emotional distance often grows in silence. Two people still caring. Still trying. Still together. Yet quietly missing each other. Sometimes awareness is the beginning. Sometimes it is simply enough to name what exists. Nothing needs to be fixed right now. Nothing needs to change immediately. This is only a recognition. And recognition, on its own, carries weight.